I don't know why I'm telling you this. Maybe as a warning, maybe I just want to know that there's someone, anyone, who will listen to what I have to say and react appropriately. I live in a small town at the base of a semi-famous mountain somewhere in Northern California. I'm not going to disclose exactly which town, however it probably wouldn't be too difficult to figure it out. Our population is 3,165, a large percentage of which consists of rich old people and weed-smoking hippies. Objectively, it's a beautiful place. There are nice restaurants for the tourists, long hikes concluding in crashing waterfalls, and views from even the downtown windows that could be called breathtaking. To the locals like me, of course, these perks are somewhat watered down by years at the tiny, poorly funded high school and the 30-minute drive to get to the nearest Walmart. But even with that being said, the spirits here are generally high, especially during the summer. I won't lie, it's not like I've never noticed strange things. I think something paranormal or otherworldly can be said about any town, especially ones that get boring after living in them your entire life. Rumors spread, stories are born and passed around like souvenirs. My town is no exception to this rule. However, until a couple of weeks ago, these stories only scared me when it was dark outside. Something started feeling seriously wrong on a perfectly sunny Sunday afternoon. My friends and I went to the city park, as we sometimes did when sitting inside, playing GTA and shit-talking the same people we knew in high school again. Did you hear that Jessica got pregnant? No way, I thought she was still in jail. Got boring. We sat by the rusty, slightly off-putting 12-foot metal clown by the jungle gym. Why did they never get rid of that thing? Eating our supermarket sandwiches and trying to subtly hit a blunt from behind our sweatshirt sleeves as the park was swarming, compared to usual, with the spring rush of tourists, enjoying the sun and each other's slightly high conversation, laughing at something my friend had said that I no longer remember but must have been funny at the time. I looked around the park. Everything seemed particularly lighthearted that day. There were children playing tag on the other side of the grass plain, people picnicking, dogs chasing sticks and joyfully returning them to their owners, and a family standing side by side, staring up at the white peaks of the mountain in what seemed like awe. "Shouldn't the snow be gone by now?" my friend said, following my gaze and motioning for the half-smoked blunt balance between my fingers. "It seems like it stays longer every year." "Because it snows later and later," I replied, glancing around before passing her the weed I'd been babysitting. "Global warming and whatnot." "Weird," Marcy called from behind us. She was hanging upside down on the bars, her long hair nearly brushing against the gravel. "It seems wrong for there to be that much snow up there in the middle of April." "There isn't any snow down here, at least," Naomi said absent-mindedly next to me, taking a long drag. I watched her flick her short blonde bangs away from her increasingly reddening eyes. All three of us went quiet for a moment, listening to the warm breeze dance in the head of the metal clown behind us, creating a hollow sort of chime. I kicked at the rocks at my feet, enjoying my buzz. The sounds of the kids running around seemed far away to me, almost like my friends and I were in a little glass box. "God," Naomi scoffed, breaking through the comfortable silence. She tried to hold in a snort. "Fucking tourists. Haven't they ever seen a mountain before?" "I know," Marcy laughed. I looked up from my shoes, looking around for who they were talking about. It was immediately obvious. The same family that I had noticed before were still standing there, facing the mountain. They were turned away from us, but I could still tell that their eyes were locked directly on the peak, their heads synonymously tilted upwards. They hadn't moved an inch. How long had it been? As if reading my thoughts, Marcy swung down from the bars, landing with a clumsy crunch. "Maybe I'm just high," she mumbled, frowning at them. "But haven't they been standing there a while?" Naomi scoffed again. "Why don't they just take a picture?" I swallowed my absence of saliva, shifting uncomfortably. My mouth was suddenly unbearably dry. Even from here I could see the camera straps around the parents' necks, untouched. A small dog, maybe a Jack Russell Terrier, scurried in circles around them. It stopped and pawed at the child's calf, dropping the tennis ball in its mouth and yapping. The kid didn't react. None of them did. I didn't know what to say. I felt like all of the breath was being sucked from my lungs. That's weird, right? Super weird. Marcy shifted uncomfortably. She had gone silent. She took the blunt from Naomi's hand and stubbed it out against the metal jungle gym, flicking the roach to the ground and stepping on it. I think I should get home. I've got laundry to do. I didn't think she was telling the truth, but I felt a little uneasy too. I nodded, pulling my sweatshirt tight around my chest. As we made our way across the grass toward the parking lot, I couldn't help but glance back at the family. Something seemed so off about them, like something was deeply wrong and I just couldn't put my finger on it. But when I turned to look, it was like it never happened. The dog was yipping happily as the kid threw his ball, and the parents were sitting on the grass, aiming the cameras around their necks at the mountain and snapping away. Over the next week, everything seemed normal. I had almost forgotten about what had happened at the park. I spent most of the time that I wasn't at work, like usual, indoors, glued to my couch, watching the same Adam Sandler movies over and over again. Most people seem to think that the nice weather made them happier, or somehow changed things. For me, it wasn't like that. Something about this town seemed to drag you down and keep you there. Even people who managed to move away make something of themselves after high school. They always came back. This town drew you in somehow. I was snapped out of my work-sleep-eat cycle finally the next Friday night. I heard honking outside my bedroom window and threw on my slightly more presentable pair of pajamas, rushing outside to find Naomi's dad's beat-up Toyota Corolla parked haphazardly against the curb. "Fancy a drive?" she called out the window in a terrible British accent. I faked a laugh and climbed into the passenger seat, rubbing the sleep out of my eyes. Sure, why not? Our late-night drives were far more common when we were teenagers, but now we seem to take them less for granted. She cranked up the staticky stereo, some shitty local pop station nearly deafening me. "Sorry," she barked over the music. "No Bluetooth." A pile of empty beer bottles and cans clanked at my feet as I hopelessly knocked them around, reaching desperately for the handle on the ceiling. "Are these yours or your dad's?" I asked, trying not to let my voice shake as she careened around a corner. "Probably a little bit of both," she yelled back with a smile. She took another rough turn and I slammed against the passenger side door. I had remembered our drives in high school being a bit more relaxing, but then again, maybe I had been the one behind the wheel. I subtly turned the music down a few notches as we took the narrowing road out of town, the lights from windows growing in scarcity and the evergreens swallowing us as we took off into the forest. "Remember when we used to drive up here and smoke and watch those weird PSA videos?" Naomi shouted. She was rolling her window down, letting in the icy breeze and making it even more difficult for me to hear her. Up here, I looked out the window at the inclining and increasingly windy road. She was taking us up the mountain. It wasn't like that was crazy or abnormal for us, but for some reason, my heart sank into my stomach. I closed my eyes, and all I could see was the back of the heads of that family, perfectly still, staring up at the skyline. I didn't open my eyes again until the car rolled to a stop. I hadn't noticed it happening, but the music was quiet now, the static sound overtaking most of any of the discernible lyrics. "Whoa," Naomi said. I blinked, my eyes adjusting to the light. Wait. The light. We were parked at the bottom of the mountain, where the hikers that often climb to the top usually set up base camp. The mountain was biggest from here, stretching across the horizon, towering above us like a monolith. We had come here so many times, and it had always been a little breathtaking, but now, I let out a wheeze. The sky was as bright as daylight. The snow-covered peaks seemed to almost glow, or even swell. I swore I could even see clouds in the sky, peeking out from behind the trees. I checked the time on the car's dashboard. 1:13 a.m. It had been pitch dark out moments ago, yet I would have sworn it was long past sunrise up here. The stereo crackled to life with a horrible sound, making me jump. The static seemed to creep up my arms and under my t-shirt, giving me goosebumps. Naomi, I whispered, frozen in place. She was already reaching for my hand, digging her fingernails into my sweaty palm. Don't. Stop. What the fuck? She exhaled. Both of us were like deer in headlights, staring dumbly at the radio. In my peripheral vision, the mountain glowed. The voice didn't sound human, nothing like the optimistic pop artist that had been singing before, nothing like anything I had ever heard before or could even have conjured up in my head. Certainly nothing I can explain in words now. Don't. Stop looking. Both the terrible screeching and the voice stopped at once, engulfing us in terrifying silence, and I found my gaze snapping back to the mountain. Right then, as crazy as it sounds, I knew it was breathing. I could almost feel it next to me, like a mouth right next to my ear. Look at us, it whispered, in clear and perfect English. I didn't need to say anything. Naomi was already shifting gears and peeling out of the parking lot. Neither of us said a word the entire drive back to town, and when she finally parked in front of my house, we took each other's hands and walked inside. She slept in my bed that night, and neither of us said a word until it was bright outside, properly bright, and the birds were reassuringly chirping outside my window. The next few days were a haze. Luckily, I had the whole weekend, so there was no need to leave and go to work. Naomi stayed over until she was confident enough to drive home alone, and although it was nice to have the space, the house felt eerily empty without her. I couldn't even wrap my head around what I had seen, what I had heard. All I knew was I didn't want to leave, didn't want to see that mountain again, even for a second. I shielded my windows with curtains, and when that didn't feel like enough, I boarded them up. I put my computer, my radio, everything but my phone in a closet at the end of the hall. I didn't want to take any chances. I didn't ever want to feel that way again, the way I had at the base of that mountain. I couldn't sleep or eat. By the end of Sunday, I felt ready enough to sip at a bowl of chicken noodle soup from a can and climb into bed. I could feel the dark circles under my eyes getting worse, threatening to swell and swallow them up altogether. With my room completely blacked out by the boarded windows, I could finally close my eyes. I don't know why I woke up when I did. Maybe I had tripped on something. All I knew was I was back exactly where we had been that night, where we had sat in the car and the radio had spoken to us. I remember not quite knowing if I was still asleep or fully awake, but I could feel the ground beneath my bare feet, aching and raw as if I had walked for hours. The wind whistled in my ears, my thin pajamas doing little to protect me from the cold. I tried to keep my balance in my strange dream-like state. Looking up, there was a man, or what looked like a man. His silhouette was almost completely indistinguishable. It was impossible to make out any details. It was like a child had taken scissors to where the rocky terrain met the backdrop of the mountain and tried to cut out the shape of a person. He was moving. I couldn't tell if it was towards me or away. I stumbled forward blindly. I felt scared, so scared I couldn't breathe, but it was like the cold was numbing all of my emotions, or like they were buried deep inside of me somehow. I didn't feel like myself, only like a body, only like a pair of legs. "Hey," I called out weakly, my voice swallowed by the screaming wind. It sounded like 1,000 voices whispering, drowning out my own. "Hey," I tried again, louder. The man didn't respond. He didn't react at all. As I grew closer, I realized he was walking away from me after all, toward the mountain. My eyes were drawn up toward the mountain again, glowing, breathing. I had to narrow my eyes until they were almost closed in order to focus. There was less snow. It seemed ridiculous, but that was what immediately popped into my head. There was far less snow on the mountain than there had been a few days ago, as if large patches had suddenly melted away, but it hadn't gotten any warmer outside. In fact, it looked like it was melting before my very eyes. It looked like it was moving, shifting, migrating. I strained my vision, trying desperately to understand what I was seeing. My blood ran cold. It wasn't the snow melting, it was people. There were people up there, thousands of people, moving. Somehow I made it back down. It's hard to remember what happened after that. No one seems to want to listen to me. Even Naomi seems to be forgetting what we witnessed. Everyone wants to brush me off or tell me I'm another conspiracy theorist, like so many of the people who live here. I don't know how to convince them of what I saw, but I saw it. I don't know what to do. There are people up there. There is something wrong with the mountain, something that calls to them. I don't know what it does to them or how. It almost got me that night. Every night I hear it breathe, and every day I see more tourists staring, walking towards the base. If you're ever driving through the mountains of Northern California and you feel compelled to stop your car and walk, keep driving, and I'm begging you, turn off your radio.